How's it going today? Today we're going to be doing this painting where I was inspired by some yellow flowers I found in the yard. So I want to show you how a few simple washes can start to build into flowers without losing some of the freshness that you actually get from watercolor. So I hope you enjoy it. Let's get to it. One of the things I like the most about painting flowers is it gives me permission to paint loosely. When I begin a watercolor like this, I'm not going to be concerned with drawing every petal accurately. Instead, I'm looking for a gesture, movement, relationships between shapes, colors. The first marks are going to help me establish a framework. They're less about describing the flower, more about creating a structure that the painting can then grow from. At this stage, I'm trying to keep the drawing light and simple. Too much detail too early can make a watercolor feel stiff before the painting even begins. So I'm moving the brush around. I'm giving color to water and letting things sort of wash, right? So you can see me there putting down the water and then coming back to add the water, sorry, to add the pigment in. You'll also see another technique that I rely on frequently, which is allowing the colors to mix directly on the page rather than on the palette. The soft transitions that are created this way often feel more natural and lively than anything I could deliberately paint. Period. Essentially, even though I'm still new at this, I'm letting watercolor painting be watercolor. I have to say, it's been a exercise in learning how to let go, getting to this point and being looser with my watercolor paints. Right? When I started to paint, I felt compelled to define every edge, right? But I find if I paint, well, how do I say this? I find that my paintings often become more interesting when things are left unresolved. So I'm letting people figure out what they want to see in the painting. You know, a soft edge, a lost shape, an area of paper that's just untouched can sometimes communicate more than a carefully rendered detailed. And since I can't carefully render details, it makes sense for me to paint this way, right? So as the flowers are beginning to emerge, I'm thinking about the hierarchy of the painting and the page. Not every flower needs to be equally important. Some become focal points, while others simply support the composition. One of the easiest ways for me to create this hierarchy is through adding stronger value. A few darker accents can draw attention without requiring any additional detail. You'll see me start to do that in certain places in the painting. Stems and leaves are playing an important role here as well. They aren't merely background elements. They create rhythm and connect the individual flowers into a single visual idea, right? So I want to make sure they're all pointing or going to one direction. When painting the foliage, I'm going to try to vary the color and edge quality so that everything doesn't feel equally as important. It goes back to that hierarchy thing. Moment of technique here. Right, to add some texture into the petals, I'm taking a sponge. So a natural sponge, which has a texture to it. I'm tabbing it or dipping it or whatever you want to say into the paint and then applying it to the page to give texture. Throughout the process of this painting, I'm constantly evaluating balance and value. And if one area becomes too heavy, another area would need to become quieter. If one flower demands too much attention, it may soften or strengthen something nearby to restore the conversation between the two different elements. Right? And you'll see me, I go in and dab out some of the paint, sometimes with my finger, sometimes with a little piece of paper, just to soften it up a little bit. Right? Because watercolor always challenges me to know when to stop. Right? I've found the medium rewards restraint. So every additional brush stroke has the potential to improve my painting or diminish the freshness that made it successful. Sometimes, for me at least, the best decision is just to put the brush down and trying to figure out when that moment is. If you're like me, you've got plenty of pieces of paper with paint on them in the trash because you went too far. Dry off a little bit with the hairdryer here so it's not too wet, so I get a little more definition of what I'm doing. Going back, adding some detail, adding some value, trying to make sure that it's a conversation between everything. And obviously, right now, that's taking the center of attention. So I need to lighten it up a little bit. So I did it at first by pulling some of the pigment out of the page. Now I'm adding water in. And then I'm adding some background atmosphere, right? All of this helps to balance this painting out. So for me, I start to define when a painting is vision, not when everything's been explained, but when enough has been suggested. I want a viewer to participate in completing the image, to discover flowers rather than simply observing. In the end, this painting really isn't about flowers, it's about color, the movement, atmosphere, and the quiet balance between intention and accident that makes watercolor such a rewarding medium for me. All right, well, thanks for joining me today in the studio. Hope you enjoyed this painting process. I'd love it if you want to subscribe, follow along as I continue to explore watercolor, abstractions, and the spaces in between the grace opportunities. Thanks again, everyone.